Over the last year or so, since I first bought my ambulance, I've given a lot of thought to what I want to put into my dream ambulance conversion. Because this ambulance will be my home. It will be where I will be living, consequently spending the vast majority of my time over the next few years, many years I hope. So I gave it a lot of thought. So you might be wondering, how do I plan to use OSO in the future? Well, my summers will primarily be spent Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, those three Western Canadian provinces, traveling secondary roads, Alberta forestry roads, BC logging roads, gravel roads and recreation areas, all sorts of different roads to get me to off-grid campsites where I will be able to stay for extended periods of time at minimal cost. So that has to be built into the ambulance. I also plan to spend a fair bit of time on Baja secondary roads and on Baja beaches. I spent 2 months in Baja last winter and I had such a good time. And I fully intend to go back with the ambulance and explore Baja even further. And of course, in order to get to those Alberta secondary roads, those BC logging roads, those Saskatchewan grid roads, those Baja beaches and the Baja secondary roads, you have to get on the highway. You have to put the pedal to the metal and travel long distances on pavement. So the ambulance has to be able to handle off-grid travel, travel on beaches, and also travel on the highway. Now, I've based my decisions on what I wanted to add to the ambulance and what I didn't on previous life experiences. And I spent many, many years as a seismic surveyor working in the Alberta oil patch, but also working in Wyoming, Montana, Nevada, California, and I was always driving a four-wheel drive vehicle. So I have extensive experience driving four-wheel drive, and I know the benefits, but I also know the drawbacks of four-wheel drive travel. So that experience has gone into a lot of my decisions. I also have several years experience driving heavy-duty vac trucks. Now these are tandem axle truck with all sorts of challenges. Now, and one thing that they don't have, they do not offer four-wheel drive. However, they do offer differential locks on both rear axles, and I found those differential locks to be very, very handy in getting out of trouble on job sites, refineries, well sites, all sorts of different industrial sites that we would have to go and work on with our vac truck. So I have a fair bit of experience using a differential lock. I also have 3 years of van life, living full-time in a Dodge Grand Caravan minivan. So I fully know the limitations of van life, but I also know how much fun it is. And that is one reason why I want to continue. And during that time, in my minivan, I've of course driven just about every kind of road that Western Canada offers. I've been on logging roads, I've been on forestry roads, grid roads, gravel roads, all sorts of pavement. And I got stuck. If you travel in Western Canada in the winter, you're going to encounter snow and you're probably going to get stuck. So I have some experience getting stuck. I also spent last winter, as I mentioned, in Baja, traveling on some backcountry roads that perhaps I should not have gone on. Too much of a challenge for my minivan, and that experience cost me a full set of tires. I also spent a lot of time on the Baja beaches, because why wouldn't you? If you're going to go to Baja, you're going to go onto the beaches. And on a lot of the beaches, like say Las Barillas, you can drive for miles on the beaches. But when you're traveling on sand, you're taking a risk of getting stuck. And I got stuck. Really, really stuck. Fortunately, some kind people, passers-by, people I had met, were there and helped me get out, so it wasn't a big deal. However, my last time getting stuck did cost me a CV joint. So these are the kind of things that I want to avoid. I don't want to get stuck in the snow. I don't want to have to wait hours for a tow truck. I don't want to get stuck in the beaches and have to impose on people to try to get me out. And I don't want to have to be going to the tire shops and the mechanics to fix the result of my misadventures. So I guess what I'm trying to say is based on my experience. I know what I want and I know what I need in order to be able to get to where I want to go. Now, I'm not building a rock crawler. I have no intention of entering my ambulance in the King of the Hammer or any of those other off-road adventure challenges. I'm not going to be going into the Arizona and the Utah backcountry and crawling over rock to get to remote areas. But even though you're just traveling on grid roads and gravel roads and forestry roads and some Baja secondary highways and secondary roads, you still can encounter problems, and so it will be nice to have the ambulance built to meet those challenges. So my first stop was the gear shop in Calgary, Alberta. And for those of you that have been following my channel, you might recognize that name because that's where I took my minivan to get a 3-inch lift kit installed. And that lift kit really came in handy when I was in Baja. So I went to the gear shop and talked to them about a lift kit for the ambulance. But the most that they would recommend was a 2-inch lift kit. Anything more than that would seriously affect the stability of the vehicle on pavement and on the highways. It might give me maybe an extra couple of inch clearance, might come in handy off-road, but the trade-off wasn't enough to warrant it. And I deferred to their expert judgment and went with the 2-inch lift kit. Now the 2-inch lift kit will allow me a little bit more clearance, and it'll also allow me to put on larger, more aggressive tires once the existing tires are finished. However, when I bought the ambulance, it was the retired City of Calgary ambulance, and it had just had a full tire change. So it was brand new tires all the way around. Bridgestone Blizzak tires. I think I'll run them until they're wore out. I also didn't want to go with four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive would be expensive, especially on a Chevy, because I would have to replace the whole front suspension and everything. And then there's the additional weight of a transfer case and another differential and all the linkages and everything like that, and the drag on those components when you're driving on pavement, cutting down mileage, highway mileage, and all those things. I just didn't really think that was the way I wanted to go. So I went for a less expensive option. I asked them to install an ARB Air-locker on my rear axle. Now, my ambulance has dual rear wheels, dualies on the rear axle, and I did not want to change those and go to something like a super single like a lot of people do, because I knew from my experiences in Baja that dual wheels would be more beneficial on the sand. Would give me a little bit more flotation, especially if you air them down right. So those things were taken into consideration, and I went with the ARB Air-locker, and I think that's going to work out really, really well for me. And while the ambulance was in the shop, at the gear shop, they also baselined all my fluids for me. By baselining my fluids, I meant they drained everything. They drained the engine crankcase, they drained the transmission, they drained the differential, they drained the cooling system, they drained everything, flushed it all out, and replaced it with top-end synthetic fluids in the crankcase, in the differential, and in the transmission. So I now have a baseline. I know exactly at what mileage all this work was done, and then I can make sure that my changes are regularly done. My next stop, after I checked the ambulance out of the gear shop, was to take a drive from Calgary out to Tilley, Alberta, which is about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive east of Calgary on Highway 1, the Trans-Canada Highway going towards Medicine Hat. And Tilley, Alberta is the home of Wester's Garage. And Wester's Garage has built quite an international reputation. Yes, believe it or not, a little shop in a little town has an international reputation for tweaking computers in vehicles to improve their mileage and to improve their performance. And they have been doing it on the Chevy Vortec engine for years, and they have it nailed. So it was well worth the time to drive out to Wester's Garage and get the computer in my van reprogrammed for better mileage and better performance. Well, that's it for now, and thank you for watching the whole video. In the next video, we'll be powder coating the wheels, we'll be installing a custom front bumper with winch, and we'll be installing a swing-away spare tire carrier. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up, share it, and subscribe. And if you subscribe, you better hit that bell, because then you'll get advance notification of all my upcoming videos. It won't cost you a cent, and it'll really help the channel. And it'll keep this old van lifer real happy. And it might just give me that kick in the ass to create more content. See you in the next video.